photos from that project. You can see the beekeepers there using a equipment called a smoker, and I'll play a short video clip on that later on in the presentation, what we use the smoker for. And there you can see them taking out some frames, bees crawling out everywhere. This is a honey frame, a super frame. That's just the name of this size frame. And this person is busy taking off the wax capping. So bees will cap the honey with a wax layer once it's ready, once it's got a certain moisture content. And in order for the human beings to extract that honey from this frame, we need to remove that protective layer of wax. There's some more wax uncapping. I love this picture. I don't know if you can notice that little toddler on the hip of the lady standing just off the center of the screen to the right. And that for me speaks so much of their context. Here's a mother, most likely unemployed, a young child, not sure of the future of this child, and along comes NNF with a project like this, and it just made the world of difference for this family and this young child. And there we have the final product. On the left-hand side, you'll see a machine in the front forefront. That's a spinner. So the honey frames fit vertically into this machine. Sometimes they are spun by hand, so it's mechanical. You're turning a lever there that's spinning the machine. And then one up from that will be an electrical version of that, where we just push a button, but it does the same thing. So because you've now uncapped those frames, you've got liquid honey in those little cells, and now this drum is spinning round and round, and that centrifugal force forces the honey out of the cells, which is then collected in the bottom of a stainless steel drum, which you see on the right-hand side. It's got a little tap. This particular one probably had a filter in as well, so this is already filtered, and they are busy bottling the liquid gold, raw honey. Okay, so let's now take a dive into the hive. I had so much fun looking back at my notes when I did my course. I did a course through Agra Provision a few years ago, and there is so much I can share on honeybees. I think even if you do a proper course, a 2-day course, there is too much information to share when you do an introductory course to beekeeping. So this evening is not a course, so don't think that you're going to walk away as a beekeeper after this. But I hope that the information that I've selected, that there's enough nuggets in there to inspire you to dive deeper into beekeeping yourself. So please forgive me, those of you who are experienced beekeepers. I did not mention all of the facts there are to mention, but I think it can be rather overwhelming if you turn a session like this into a more of a workshop. All right, that was not the intention or purpose of this evening, but I want to give you enough to keep you going and dive deeper yourself. So basically, 3 types of bees we're going to look at. We have male bees, which we call drones. The female bees are called worker bees. And then we have the queen bee, who is also female. That's why we call her the queen and not the king. All right, so basically male bees, female bees, and in female bees, you have the queen and you've got the worker bees. Starting with the queen, her role is just to lay eggs. That's what she does. She produces a pheromone to maintain social order within the colony. So a pheromone, think of it like as perfume. So she's got a certain scent, and the little worker bees that attend to her needs all day long, they help spread that pheromone throughout the colony, and thus creating that social order. So the rest of the bees know that there's a queen in the house, Okay, so when there's no queen, there's no leader, there could be dissension in the ranks and there could be chaos, but if there's a queen, there's stability. Right, her appearance is long and slim, and she's got almost like a V-shaped tip to the end of her abdomen. You also see that her abdomen is much longer than her wingspan. So if you look at if the center of the screen is a queen bee, you can see that her wings are about halfway on her abdomen. They don't extend all the way to the tip. All the other bees on the screen have got their wing tips right at the tip of their abdomen. So she will only leave the hive in two types of scenarios. The one is if she's just emerged as the new queen, she will go on a mating flight. The queen only mates once in her life. And if the colony swarms, so that means a queen bee says, I've run out of space, I want to go somewhere else, I'm going to take some of the worker bees with me, and I'm going to start a new colony elsewhere. So that's what we call swarming. Some of the bees will stay behind, and if you do a course, you'll learn all about that swarming behavior, how to identify it, what to do if you start picking up that the swarm might be happening, how you can prevent that, etc. Here's more pictures of queen bee. So you'll find her, she's just off the center of the screen. She's got a little white dot on her back. That was just the beekeeper marking their queen so that she's easier to identify. There's also different colors that we use for different years in which we found this queen or found this colony. And that just tells us more or less the age. We can never say exactly how old our queen is, but it gives us an indication of when she came to us. So I don't mark my queen bees, but it certainly is easier to spot them if they are marked. And there's another close-up of a queen bee. This one has got a little blue dot on her back. Notice once again that abdomen sticking way out from the wings. That's how we identify our queen bee. I want to play you a clip, which this was an inspection on one of my hives. It was with one of my colleagues from UBON, Sharon Ramsey. She's the current secretary of the executive committee, and Sharon became my mentor and really took my beekeeping journey to a new level. And this was the first inspection I did with her, and we spotted the queen. Take a look. You can't see her now. See if you can spot her. There we go. I hope you can see her. All right.
First time I've seen the queen. I know.
Okay, so and that's special because we don't see the queen bee every time we do an inspection. We look for signs of a queen, but we don't spend that much time in the hive that we actually look for every single time. As long as there are signs of her presence, and we know that through these capped cells that you see, we know that eggs have been laid in those cells. There's a larvae or a pupa in there, and a young bee will emerge soon. Those are all signs that there was a queen in this colony. So I don't have to spot the queen every single time I do a inspection. Moving on to the male bees, they are called drones. And drones mate with a virgin queen from another colony. Okay, it's important. They will fly out of the colony. They will gather in a area where the other drones are waiting for a queen, a virgin queen, to go on a mating flight. They are much bigger in appearance than a normal worker bee, and they are often mistaken for the queen because of their size. But if you look closely, the bee on this screen has got, it looks like a bodybuilder. It's really plump. But look at the wingspan. The wingspan there is exactly the same length as the body. And another telltale sign of a drone are these big wraparound eyes. They touch almost at the top of the head. So they're really huge, and that's how we tell a drone from the queen bee or any other worker bee. They unfortunately die after mating with the queen. So one might say their purpose is to really be born so that we can continue the the bee populations, because without them we cannot have new queens that mate and that produce more eggs, that produce more bees, and so without drones the whole thing collapses as well. They do die, and at a certain time in the year they get kicked out because they eat the food reserves. They don't contribute to any of the other tasks within the hive. And when it gets closer to winter, the worker bees will say, well, we are busy working really hard to store up winter reserves, and we cannot afford the male bees to be around and eat up all the food in our pantry, and then there's nothing left for us for the rest of the winter. So they actually get dragged out, kicked out, killed, but they have to leave the hive, unfortunately. So their fate has been sealed. Drones can't sting. That's an interesting fact. So if you ever come across a drone bee, you can safely handle it and you won't get stung. Looking at worker bees, their name says exactly what they do. They are workhorses. They really work hard and they have different roles to play within the hives. They're starting with housekeeping. So when a baby bee, I call them baby bees, but that's not what we call them. We call them young bees. When a young bee emerges from the cell, they eat through the little wax capping and they emerge, and their very first job is to be the housekeeper, to go back into that cell and clean their very own cell that they just came from. And then they will start with other housekeeping duties. So they have to clean the hive. Here is just a short clip. I won't play the whole one, but just so you can see, there's a bee in the center of the screen, busy crawling out, and
Look at that. There's another one
there we go. She's out.
There's another one over there. You see it? Yes.
All right, so there's another one emerging, and that was also amazing to see. All right, let's see. I'm stuck here. Just want to fast forward this. Okay. All right. So one of the signs of a healthy colony is that the floor at the bottom is clean, that the hive on the inside is clean. If there's a lot of debris lying around and it's a mess in the hive box, the actual hive box, when you're looking down into it, you know that something is wrong. From being housekeepers, they become nursing bees, feeding the larvae. So those white little worms in the cells you see are actually bee larvae. Then they become builders and processors. So they have to build wax comb, they have to receive nectar from the forager bees, and they have to process that and turn that into honey, and they also attend to the queen. Then the next upgrade, the next promotion is to become a guard, and they have to protect the hive. So they're the ones that will stand guard and make sure that you don't have pirates, bee pirates, or wasps coming into your hive. And then the final job of a worker bee is to be a forager. So when we see bees in our garden, those are the older worker bees. That is the last job that they have to do, that they have to fulfill before they die. And a worker bee is about 5 to 6 weeks she lasts, and then her job here on earth is done. So they go out, they collect pollen and nectar. Both of those are necessary. Both of those are food for the bees. So sometime in the year we have a lot of flowers that produce pollen but not nectar, or vice versa. And as a beekeeper, those are things that you're going to have to learn and also understand the context in your area. It's different for different areas. So even for the same tree or shrub, you know, in Okahanya might flower at a slightly different time than one standing 10 kilometers from that same location. So you have to really pay attention to what's going on around you in your area to decide how to act accordingly and how to support your bees effectively. Right, so a bee visits 50 to 100 flowers every trip that it makes. So every time a forager bee leaves the hive, it'll visit between 50 and 100 flowers, and they make 10 to 15 trips a day. Right, it takes 12 bees' life work to make 1 teaspoon of honey. So let that sink in. Can you imagine the work that goes into making 1 teaspoon of honey? Right, now bee behavior. I've just got a few facts here for you on the screen. In Namibia, we have what we call the African honeybee, also called the Western honeybee, and the scientific name is Apis mellifera scutellata. In southern Africa, you also have the Cape honeybee. So both the African honeybee and the Cape honeybee, which is Apis mellifera capensis, so from the Cape. But in Namibia, the only bee species we've got is the African honeybee, the Apis mellifera scutellata, and we would like to keep it that way. So for various reasons, but introducing other bee species will lead to the collapse of our colonies, and we have some of the healthiest bees in the world, and it's something we really need to protect. Our bees are very defensive and alert. It's all about survival of the fittest. So you can imagine in our harsh climatic conditions, food is scarce, and the bees have to work really hard to make that 1 teaspoon of honey, which we then come and take from them. All right. So important to remember that bees don't create honey for us. They create honey as a food source for them. That's the form in which they store their nectar so that they can consume it during periods of drought when there isn't nectar and food outside of the hive. And along comes the beekeeper and we take some of their food. So what has happened over time is that the colonies that were able to defend their food reserves the best, in other words, the ones that were the most defensive and most alert, are the ones that survived those severe drought periods. And that's why the African honeybee, as we know it, is, and I don't like to use the word, but I'll say it because people get context, is a more aggressive bee. So that's the only time I want to use the word aggression tonight. We talk of it as defensive and alert because aggression has got a negative connotation to it. And the Americans love dramatizing this. And they talk about the African killer bee as if it's out to kill you. It's out to protect its food reserve. And I think here in Namibia, we actually show the rest of the world that you can work successfully and safely with a defensive/alert honeybee. Just to those of you who've never had a beekeeping experience, I just want to show you this clip. It's just a few seconds long. But this is what happens when you open up a hive of 60,000 bees and they start getting a bit aggravated with you. So you'll hear, if you can hear the sound in this video, it's going to sound, you're going to hear the bouncing of the bees into the camera and onto our suits that we are wearing. And that's a warning. It's just the bees saying, I don't like what you're doing. Can you please close up my home and leave my food reserves alone? Let me try and get to play this. Here we go.
Do you see anything in those cells?
All right. So you get the idea. 60,000 bees buzzing around you, and you've got to remain calm, and there's no need to not be calm when you are wearing the right protective gear. So we'll talk about the right gear in a moment. Worker bees communicate their location and distance of the food source by means of a dance. So we call it the waggle dance. And they have two stomachs. So a forager bee has a stomach for food, and they've got a honey stomach. We call it a honey stomach. It's a stomach where they put the nectar when they go out and forage. So that is completely separate from their own stomach digestive system, if I can call it that. And when they return to the hive, they actually transfer the nectar from one bee to the next. So you can imagine it's almost like vomiting up the nectar you've just gone and foraged, passing it on to the next bee. That bee takes it to the honey stomach, turns around, walks a few centimeters, gets to the next bee, transfers it to that bee, and so forth. And eventually, at some point, the bee takes that nectar, which is now through each stomach that it's passed, each honey stomach, more enzymes have been added, and they've also reduced the water content of the nectar. So trophallaxis is the process. It's what we call that process. And it's just the bee's way of turning nectar into honey as we know it. So once the nectar is into the little cells, they will fan their wings. So there's bees whose job it is to fan their wings over these cells full of nectar. And the reason why they do that is to remove moisture, to have a water evaporation. That's what they're encouraging. And when it gets to a moisture content of less than 20%, they will put a wax capping over that. Now, those of you who have heard of mead, mead is fermented honey. So it's an alcoholic beverage that we create from honey. And mead comes from nectar or honey that had a moisture content of more than 20%. So if we are looking for honey to harvest, if we harvest too soon, in other words, when the moisture content is too high, we will most certainly not have honey in the end, but rather mead by accident, but nonetheless. I think I've touched on this, but the queen lays between 1,500 to 2,500 eggs per day. When I heard this, I thought, surely this can't be. It must be a typo, right? Who lays 1,500 to 2,500 eggs a day? But this woman is really, really busy. And she mates only once in her life. Okay, it's not any other time. She mates once. She stores the sperm in a special compartment. And she actually has the ability to lay either a fertilized egg or an unfertilized egg. So it's another setting she's got to turn on and off. If it's an egg that's not fertilized, that egg develops into a drone bee. And if it's a fertilized egg, it develops into a worker bee. So I already mentioned that the queen's pheromone is like the social glue in the colony that gives order and structure. All right, she also inhibits the ovary production of worker bees, female bees. So if there was no queen, what would happen is that those worker bees would want to start laying eggs themselves. All right, and having a queen present suppresses the development of their ovaries and their ability then to lay eggs. And I think if you do a course, you can go into more detail. I don't want to overwhelm the beginners here this evening, but just so you know that there's also a whole science behind that.